G'day guys, in this video we're going to talk about hammer technique. I've had a few people contact me asking me about how I go about hammer control. Now, hammer technique is something that's very important to me because I want to be able to do this for a very long time. I want to do this professionally, so I want to be able to continue swinging a hammer for as long as is physically possible. And there are a few people who have asked the difference between equal-ended hammers, like this cross peen or a straight peen or a rounding hammer, and a dog's head, which, if you've watched my channel for a while, you'll know that I'm quite a big fan of the dog's heads. And there are some subtle differences. But before we get into that, I want to just get started with the very, very simple premises of hammer swinging. I prefer in my shop hammers between 2 and 3 pounds. Sometimes I'll swing a 5 pound if I'm driving drifts or something like that, where I need that extra energy. But for the most part, I swing between 2 and 3 because I don't need the extra weight in the head when I have a longer handle. Now, hammers are a lever. Basically, the handle is just a lever. The longer the lever, the more force you can apply at the end. And the force is the mass times acceleration. So if you have a large mass and a short lever, you're only accelerating it at the speed that your hand goes. The further away from your arm you go, the faster the acceleration, the more impact you get, the more force. So I can provide as much force with a 2 pound head with a long handle as I can with a 5 pound head with a very, very short handle. So I go for the smaller heads, A, because I can provide just as much force, B, because it wears out my arm a lot less. I can swing for a lot longer during the day. I've tried swinging a 4 pound sledge all day, and at the end of it, you're pretty sore. I imagine you could build up your muscles to get used to it, but I don't see the necessity, especially because of the strain it puts on your elbow and your shoulder joints. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that everything that you do in the blacksmith shop should be done close to the body. Now, this isn't just a hammer technique thing. This is also grinding. This is also buffing. This is also, tong handling. This is everything. Everything should be done close to the body. The closer you are to your center of mass, the closer you are to your body, the more control you have. The same thing goes when you're stepping up to the anvil. When you're standing at the anvil, you don't want to be miles away trying to control a hammer at your full extent of your arm and the tongs at the full extent of your arm. Because what that does is provide no control. The tighter you bring it in, the more stable you are. Just try, get a friend, pull your arm out like that and get a friend to just push on your hand. Then tuck it into your side and get him to push on the hand again. I know you already know the answer. It's going to be a lot harder for them. So, when you come to hammer swinging, that's one of the most important things, is that all of your swing is done close to the body. I see a lot of people swing their hammer like this, what I call chicken winging, because they make that chicken wing, and they bring it up, and they bring it down, and they keep it out. I don't know why they do that, but it seems to be natural inclination for some people. What I do is I tuck mine in to my side, and my elbow is basically brushing my side. Now, if you're a bit thinner than me, which isn't hard, then you probably won't be brushing your side, because that would just be awkward. But you want to keep it nice and close in, basically so that the forearm is dangling down. Just like if you were leaving your arms to hang at your side, that's where you basically want to be. The elbow should be following that straight line through your shoulder. The main reason for that is because the further out from your shoulder you get, the more leverage you're putting on your shoulder joint, your ball and socket joint, and your rotator cuff. And I know a few people who've swung big hammers for a long time, and they've torn their rotator cuff because they've swung out for too long. Again, it's all about that game of leverage. The same thing goes with the elbow. A lot of people swing from the elbow like this. They punch the hammer. The problem with that is that they're relying on this joint being manipulated back and forth. Now, if you think of a piece of steel, if you bend that piece of steel back and forth, it slowly weakens. Now, obviously, our elbows aren't steel, but you are weakening that joint. You're constantly working that joint. When you're blacksmithing, you should be using the strongest muscles, which are your back muscles, your bicep and your tricep as well, and your trapezius muscles, to drive the hammer. So most of your hammer swings will come from the shoulder. My arm stays at an almost right angle to my hammer, and my wrist stays rigid. Now, I'm not rigidizing my wrist when I come to impact, because that would just hurt me. I am remaining loose on the hammer, and I do grip flick, right? I release with my forefinger. I'm doing this a little bit more exaggerated. I actually am the opposite for most people. Most people will grip with the forefinger and the thumb and flick with the pinky. I actually do the opposite. I grip with the pinky and flick with the forefinger. But that provides me that extra inertia at the end of the blow, and also provides a loose joint between the hammer and my hand. If I'm gripping this in a death grip, when I come to that impact, all of that shock is traveling up my arm. Instead, having that loose grip allows the hammer to, I can hammer with just 2 fingers on the hammer and still provide accurate, powerful blows. The big thing is that this is just a guide. The power is coming from up here, and it's propelled from here to about here. After that, the hammer is basically sent on its way to the piece. What a lot of people I see doing is that they try and slow the hammer down before they hit the anvil face. Realistically, you should be trying to aim to hit somewhere down here, straight through the piece. Because if you're slowing the hammer, you're actually increasing your grip, and again, transferring that shock up the arm. So we've got right angle to the hammer, so almost like 2 halves of a square, and we're just up and down from the shoulder. And the shoulder, because it's a ball joint, doesn't receive half as much stress, especially if we've got it that nice and close to our body. Now, there are certain hammer blows, like if you're coming over the edge of the anvil and you're trying to forge in towards yourself, where the wrist becomes more important and the elbow. But for your general hammer forging, you want to be swinging up and down. And the more linear you get, the more accurate you get. Now, that's for equal-ended hammers and most other hammers. But yeah, that is the main goal. In tight and then linear, and as close in as you possibly can. And try not to be rigid in your hammer grip. Now, that goes the same for our dog's head hammers, but in the case of a dog's head hammer, most of the weight is already forward of the hammer, so it's already trying to fall away from you. With an equal-ended hammer, it doesn't matter which way it falls, sideways or other ways, it's not going to try and correct itself. So you have to drive it a little bit as it comes to the anvil. Whereas with a dog's head hammer, it naturally drives itself. If I let it go, doesn't matter which way I let it go, it wants to fall face down. You can see how it's automatically correcting. So, with a dog's head hammer, I will throw it like a dart. I'll throw it from up here, and then from here it's basically just guiding itself to the anvil. I'm just allowing it to fall. And you'll notice that my grip is so loose that I let the rebound carry me back up into that ready stance. Now, if I'm hitting a hot piece of metal, that's pretty much going to stop. But that loose grip allows the shock to go through my handle and then out into the wobble yonder, soaked up by the meat of my hand rather than the bones. So there isn't a significant difference, but again, I'm throwing this more like a dart, whereas I'm guiding the straight peen or the cross peen or whatever equal-ended hammer you're using. I have to guide it a little bit more down towards the ground. Couple of things to avoid, obviously chicken winging is one of them, is thumbing the hammer. Now, over a short period of time, this isn't going to hurt you, but over a long period of time, that impact, that direct impact to the anvil or the piece of material is pushing back on this thumb joint, and you'll get what's called hammer thumb, which is basically a form of rheumatoid arthritis, and it'll really mess your hand up. So if you thumb the hammer, I would suggest unlearning that habit. I tend to half thumb the hammer, but I do not keep my thumb rigid on the hammer. It rubs the hammer. It's still a guiding force. It's along the side of the hammer, but when I hit, my thumb slides past. It's not actually rigid on the back of the hammer. So I can still feel that guiding force, but I'm not at risk of damaging my hand. The big thing about this is we're all trying to improve our body functions and make sure that we're not hurting ourselves. The other thing to avoid is direct inline coming across your body too much. One of the main things for that is because when it bounces back, it's going to come straight back in here. And the other one is over leaning. I see people lean way over the anvil and kind of punch in like this. I don't understand how this works, but you want to be relatively upright. You want to have your shoulders back as much as you can. Good posture always helps. And the anvil should be at the height, or depending on what you're doing, but the average is the anvil should be at the height of your knuckles when at rest. So when your hand is hanging by your side, it should be about the height of the knuckles. There is a bit of argument about that. Some cutlers like to have their anvils a bit higher. Some farriers and stuff like that like to have their anvil a bit lower. It does depend on what you're doing, but that's the average. That's where I like to keep mine, and it's comfortable. You learn what's comfortable and you go with that. The higher your anvil is, the more upper arm you're going to be using. The lower your anvil is, the more back you're going to be using. Now, back is the other thing. A lot of people I see tend to swing a hammer like this. Nothing wrong with it, but you're not imparting as much force from this as you can into the piece. For some things, like if you're just doing technical details, making leaves and stuff like that, I'll be perfectly still, especially on small stock. But on big stock, I'm going to want to bounce. I'm going to want to drop my knees, and I'm going to want to bend a little bit, but I'm not bending at the waist without moving my legs. My legs are moving first. And the reason for that is because I'm propelling that force into the anvil. It's the same, very much the same as a fighter. If you're fighting, you don't just throw the arm. You throw the hip and then the arm. You're throwing that full body motion into the punch. It's the same thing with a hammer. If you're trying to get a decent amount of force, you want to throw your body and then the hammer. And that's important. You don't want to throw the hammer and then your body, because you're not going to be doing anything at that point. You throw your body and then the hammer. If you're throwing that hard from the shoulder, you're putting a lot of risk into your shoulder here. Whereas throwing that body, I get the same amount of energy as I would throwing it as hard as I can with my shoulder, but I'm putting less weight on this because there's less distance to travel, and I've also got the advantage of my body weight coming behind it. And that's why I prefer a knuckle height anvil over a very high anvil, because I can't then give those energetic blows to my piece. Now, there are a couple of other hammers that you could go to, like sledgehammers and stuff like that. I may cover that in another video if you're interested in sledgehammer technique. But this is basically my rundown on how I go about hammer technique. Now, to finish off, I've got 2 tips on preventing carpal tunnel and wrist cramps in when hammering. A lot of people, when they get started, a lot of people when they have been hammering for a long time, will start to develop that soreness, stiffness, and when you wake up in the morning tingling in your hand, that's the onset of carpal tunnel. A good way to test for it is to put your knuckles together this way and press and hold that for 15 seconds. If your fingers start to go numb in that hand, then you probably have the thickening of the nerve at that point and you are risking carpal tunnel. One of the ways to avoid it is to stretch. Always stretch. There are a number of stretches you can do, the standard across the arm, standard over the back, the standard back reach, which I've never been good at. But the 2 that are most important for me, especially my right hand, which is my hammer hand, is the fingertip pull, which you can do against a wall, or you can do against a frame or something like that. But you just push your right hand out, or your left hand, depending on which your hammer hand is, and grab your tips of your fingers and pull like that. Now, you don't want to pull so hard that you pull your fingers into your wrist, but you just want to feel the stretch along the nerves and the tendons in your wrist. And the other one is the top of the wrist, which is the opposite. You're just putting your hand down and pushing that way. I've also found that if I grab the horn of my anvil or the face of my anvil or something low and then turn my body and just let those fingers splay and turn my body, I can stretch the bicep and the forearm. And those are stretches that I use every day when I'm hammering a lot. So hopefully this was helpful. If you have any other questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. I upload a video every Wednesday and I have a live stream every Saturday. I'd like to take this chance to thank my patrons, Jared, Nathan, Andy, Kine, Rich, Braden, and my newest one, Mike. Thank you very much for joining me on the Patreon crew. I have a couple of other patrons that will be announced in next month's videos after their donations come through. If you want to join the Patreon family, there is a link down below to check that out. If you want to check out my merch, my Redbubble store is down there, Etsy, all that kind of stuff. It's all available in the description below. If you don't want to support me monetarily, that's totally cool. If you want to see more from me, please hit that subscribe button and make sure to hit that bell notification icon to be notified of when I upload a new video. If you want to support the channel just by hitting that like button, that'd be great. And if you have any questions that you don't want to put in the comment sections, or if you've got something that's a little bit more in-depth, there's no such thing as a stupid question, please feel free to email me at samtownsbladesmith@gmail.com. With that being said, guys, have a fantastic week, and I'll see you on Saturday.